Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign, and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding. We, thine unworthy servants, gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the king, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please be seated.
I've heard it so many times. You like this?
This Honourable House now resumes its sitting. It is indeed a great honour and pleasure to welcome all of you to this sitting of this Honourable House of Representatives. Today, Tuesday, July 18, 2023. I would like to extend a special welcome to those joining us via the various social media platforms, PBCJ, live stream, and to those who are seated in the gallery. House Leader. Call up the roll.
Mr. Bartlett, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Ms. Grange, Mr. McKenzie, Mr. Chuck, Dr. Tufton, Ms. Williams, Mrs. Williams, Mr. Vaz, Mrs. Malawu Fort, Mr. Charles, Mr. Green, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Main, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Mr. Terry Long, Dr. Dunn, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Witter, Ms. Smith, Mr. Davis, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown-Burke, Dr. Charles, Mrs. Malawu Fort, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davis, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Henry Cates, Mr. Henry, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Mr. Montague, Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Siblist, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright, Dr. Chang, Dr. Clark, Dr. Wheatley,
House Leader, hold a moment. The clerk is on her feet again.
Mr. Witter,
Yes, House Leader, thank you.
Madam Speaker, I would like to join you in welcoming members, and particularly to welcome those who are listening and participating in a quiet way on other media platforms. Today, Madam Speaker, is going to be a very strong day, if not a long day, but certainly a strong day. There are a number of very important matters on the agenda to be dealt with. Mainly, though, Madam Speaker, in terms of tabling of bills. But to begin the House, Madam Speaker, the statements by ministers, as indicated here, Madam Speaker, we intend to have the Minister of Health making a statement. The Minister isn't here at the moment, Madam Speaker, but just to indicate that we will seek a recommittal of that item at a later point to enable him to make his statement. May it please you, Madam Speaker. Speaker, the Minister of Health is in the chambers, and since in fact we had not moved on to the next item, may it please you, Madam Speaker, to ask that the Minister makes his statement at this time.
It's actually a tabling. Madam Speaker,
We are going to now proceed into statement by ministers. The Honourable Christopher Tufton, Minister of Health and Wellness, will now make his statement. Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm tabling today in this Honourable House two bills entitled the National... Mic, it's on. Should I move to another location? Microphone check. Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am tabling today in this Honourable House two bills entitled the National Family Planning Repeal Bill 2023 and the National Council on Drug Abuse Repeal Bill 2023. Madam Speaker, both repeal bills will provide for the integration of the National Family Planning Board, NFPB, and the National Council on Drug Abuse, NCDA, it's here, NCDA into the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and the transfer of the functions, assets, rights, and liabilities of both entities to the Ministry. Madam Speaker, the National Council on Drug Abuse was established as a body corporate by the government of Jamaica in December 1991 pursuant to the National Council on Drug Abuse Act to review and monitor the misuse of drugs in Jamaica. Undertake subject to the approval of the Minister responsible for health measures for preventing the misuse of drugs or dealing with social problems connected with the misuse of drugs, and to consider and provide advice on matters concerning drug use and abuse. Madam Speaker, the National Family Planning Board was established under Section 3.1 of the National Family Planning Act 1970. The NFPB is responsible for preparing, carrying out, and promoting family and population planning programs in Jamaica, as well as acts as the principal agency of government for the allocation of financial assistance or grants to other bodies or persons engaged in the field of family and population planning in Jamaica. The National Family Planning Board will be integrated into the ministry as a division called the National Family Planning Services, Madam Speaker, while the National Council on Drug Abuse will become a department of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. So, Madam Speaker, the National Family Planning Services Division will seek to strategically adopt key constructs of the social determinants of health, the people-centered approach, and the social ecological model to expand the national health response. Its goal will be to advance a people-centered approach towards the achievement of sustainable health outcomes among the most vulnerable populations. Key among its functions, Madam Speaker, will be to foster an enabling environment for care pathways, ensuring the establishment of referrals and counter-referral systems and care transition to health-related non-clinical issues, and coordinating structured partnerships and strategic alliances for the merging of the health sector with social services sector and civil society for the effective implementation of the client-centered approaches across sectors. The new division, Madam Speaker, will also be tasked with empowering and engaging individuals, families, and communities to increase coverage
Minister,
of the...
Sorry to disturb you. I've been listening for quite a while. The House has been very noisy, just a hovering of just constant discussion and crosstalk. We're not sounding very pleasant at all, and I definitely would love to hear the Minister's presentation. So would we be so kind as to just come to order so that we can listen to the Honourable Minister. Minister Tufton.
Thank you very much for your usual protection, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, the new division will be tasked with empowering and engaging individuals, families, and communities across coverage of the underserved and marginalized and enhance mutual accountability. The NCDA, while continuing its core functions, will see an expanded mandate to include our national response to mental health. The integration of these two entities, Madam Speaker and colleagues, is in accordance with the public sector transformation action plan that outlines the policy on the categorization and rationalization of public bodies, which includes mergers, closures, shared service arrangements, and divestment of several public bodies, which notes that the functions of these entities do not require body corporate status. Additionally, Madam Speaker, the integration will allow for the achievement of synergy in operations and greater efficiencies. At the same time, the integration will see the streamlining of services and eradicating duplication of effort. I wish, therefore, Madam Speaker, to further advise this Honourable House that the repeal of the National Council on Drug Abuse Act will lead to consequential amendments to the Dangerous Drug Act. The main adjustments, Madam Speaker, would see the replacement of any reference to the NCDA with the Ministry of Health and Wellness. It is also to be noted, Madam Speaker, finally, that comments on both bills were sought and received from the Attorney General's chamber, and the Cabinet has given its approval for both to be tabled in the Parliament. Madam Speaker, I close by saying I do appreciate that this will require some consideration. So the intention was just to present on this side today and then leave it for the next sitting, maybe after the break, for a more substantive discussion from both sides. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Tufton. The opposition spokesperson. On
Thank you
health,
much.
Dr. Guy?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I hear the latter part of the Minister's appeal that there will be a more fulsome discussion, but something just grabs me as he makes his presentation, and certainly it will be discussed in the Parliament. Minister, what is the mischief outside of the recommendations by the Public Sector Transformation Action Plan that you seek to cure by having these two entities within the parent ministry? The truth is that there have been recommendations that have come from this particular entity, public sector, which government is not necessarily minded to accept. I will even mention one which was like the Jamaica Mortgage Bank, which was supposed to have been privatized, and it has not been done yet because the cabinet took a decision on that. Now, why is it that this has to be done? Because those two agencies, as far as we are aware in the country, have been doing significantly good jobs in not only with the Family Planning Board, but also the National Council on Drug Abuse. I see in the penultimate page of your presentation, it says the integration will allow for achievement of synergy in operations and greater efficiencies. But is it that the ministry, the core ministry, does any of these at the present time, which would suggest and support this particular statement being made?
So, Madam Speaker, again, and I thank the member, my colleague, for his usual prompt response to these issues of national importance. And I will again say that we will have a time to more fulsomely debate. Just to say one thing in the response, that is the functionality around the particular agency is one issue that is unique to the agency. So family planning issue are obviously specific, or counsel on drug abuse, drug use and abuse, the specialists that deal with that. That's true. But at the same time, there are services that are common across agencies. So the accounting function, Madam Speaker, is a common function. So when we speak about shared services, we speak about consolidation of services that could be done by one unit or individual while still preserving the specifics of what the core mandate is. And that's where you achieve some savings and efficiencies, which is what the Public Sector Modernization Unit aims to do. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, if I may just...
Opposition Leader.
Thank you. Two questions prefaced by the remark that the idea of merging back into central government things that in the past have been pushed out into statutory bodies is something generally I agree with. I'm just interested to know, first of all, what will happen to the staff, the leadership and staff of those two boards, the Family Planning Board and the National Council on Drug Abuse. You know, I'm interested to know what will happen to that. And also, in the case of the National Council on Drug Abuse, I think they support things like the Drug Court Program, which is an important program to try and help persons with a substance abuse problem who come into conflict with the law but are really addicts, help to resolve their addictions by appropriate rehab-based programs outside of the court system, which are supervised, I think, through the Ministry of Health presently, through the psychiatric arm of the Ministry of Health. That's my recollection of how it worked, certainly when I was minister. But I know the National Council plays a role in some of these programs, and will that continue in the ministry in its present form, or will that change? So I'm just interested to, you know, I hear about synergies and efficiencies and so on, and obviously shared services is something that we've been working towards for some time and needs to be deepened and strengthened. But one would think that one could avail oneself of shared services without necessarily eliminating the entities themselves. So if we're going the route of actually eliminating those entities, I'm interested to know what will happen to the key personnel who run them currently.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So it's not envisioned that the staff of both entities would be affected adversely. What instead would happen is that the integration would mean not just shared services, but a much wider pool of resources, where the relationships now between a ministry that has been consolidated and, let's say, the regional authorities and their functionaries in the field, whether it is community health aides or otherwise, and would be a more direct relationship. Yes, you could have collaboration without consolidation, but the reality is that collaboration would add another layer of bureaucracy, which you could overcome through the consolidation. So remember now, the objective is to not just consolidate, but to strengthen the functions. And strengthening the functions is not going to mean reducing the complement of staff. It actually means integrating the existing complement in a much more wider body with a lot more network and engagement, which therefore will make the role and the function more effective. That's the idea. That's the rationale behind it. So, Madam Speaker, I don't envision any change except a more efficient response to the particular challenges of the respective areas. And we will discuss further if there are other concerns or queries later on. Thank you.
Yes, you may go ahead, Member Hannah.
Minister, at some point, once it becomes a division of the ministry, will you come to Parliament to discuss the policy of the government, perhaps for a more enlarged, empowered family planning purpose for the country? In other words, Madam Speaker, if I may give the Minister an example, I have a young mother in my constituency. She's not yet 30, but she has several children, and she's unwed. But when she went to her public clinic, the nurse at the clinic, because she said she wanted to get her tubes tied, and when she went to the clinic, the nurse said to her, "But you're a young woman. You're not married yet. We're not tying your tube." And she came to me as her member of Parliament to ask what I could do to assist her, because she had children for different fathers, but she didn't want any more. And the public clinic was telling her not to tie her tubes because she was young. She perhaps never met her husband yet, and so they were not going to grant her wish. And the reason why I ask you this is because we have to have a more enlightened approach to women and their bodies in this country and what their choices are. And I'm urging you, when the time is right, Minister, to come and tell us what now this division is going to be doing. Whether it is two is better than too many or something else about family planning in this country.
Madam Speaker, I thank the member. Madam Speaker, it's an interesting point that is raised, but let me respond the following way and then make a general statement in 30 seconds. First of all, it is the duty of the clinicians to provide family planning advice. And so I would not fault a nurse or a doctor, as the case may be, having had an appearance with a mother or a potential mother to say, you know, this is my advice to you as part of family planning. I mean, I don't think we can stay here and judge the right or wrong of that advice because of that particular situation. But having said that, I think it's important to recognize too that from a family planning perspective, this is counterintuitive because the numbers may not be as available, that we are in fact moving in a direction as a country which we will have to confront from a family planning and economic and social development perspective, where our population is actually aging and in decline. And I don't want to be the purveyor of reckless engagement, to put it diplomatically. but the reality, Madam Speaker and colleagues, is that we actually need more children than fewer children for the future to continue in a manner where we have the economic and social modeling of our society that preserves things like productivity, production, output, and I could go on. Now, it is true that we need responsible parenting and child rearing. So, because the data suggests a few other things. The data suggests that those who can most afford it are not the ones that are having them. And the data also suggests that it leads to a range of other issues. But, Madam Speaker, when that debate is had, I look forward to greater dissecting of the data, and I agree with the member that we need to show cause, purpose, and the validity of why this move is important. But I do believe that we have the information to support that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Announcements?
Laid on the table of the House. Laid on the table of the House today are the following. Annual report of the Montego Beach 1975 Limited for the financial year 2014-2015. Annual report on audited financial statements of the Financial Sector Adjustment Company Limited for the year ended March 31, 2022, and its related ministry paper number 72 of 2023. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Financial Institution Services Limited for the year ended March 31, 2022, and its related ministry paper number 73 of 2022. Annual report and audited financial statements of the National Works Agency for the financial year 2015-2016. Annual report on audited financial statements of the Factories Corporation of Jamaica Limited for the financial year 2015-2016. The Casino Gaming Minimum Capital Investment Order 2023 and its resolution under the Casino Gaming Act. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures under the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2027 in respect of the Denham Town Community Zone, the Mount Salem Community and environs in the parish of St. James Zone, the Norwood Community in the parish of St. James Zone, the Parade Gardens Zone, the Savannah Lamar Zone, the Greenwich Town Zone, and the August Town Zone. Extension of period of operation. Number 4, orders 2023 and their resolutions. Also, the ministry paper under the just named titles for the social intervention for the period June 14, 2023 to July 13, 2023. June to July. Jamaica Public Bodies second supplementary of revenue and estimate for the year ended March 31, 2024. Second supplementary estimates for the financial year ended March 31, 2024. The General Consumption Tax, Amendment of Schedule Order 2023 and its resolution under the General Consumption Tax Act, and the report of the Joint Select Committee to consider and report on the Bail Act 2022. Also, the Auditor General's Department Special Audit Report in respect of the Passport, Immigration and Citizenship Agency, HR practices.
Thank you. Bills brought from the Senate.
I just heard the clerk mention a report that was, I didn't see it on the list of documents that, it's been printed. So, Madam Speaker, I take it that we have received now the opinion of the Attorney General in relation to this matter.
Why would you take it so?
Well, what I thought I heard was that the Auditor General's report is now being tabled.
What I heard is that the Auditor General's report in respect of PICA is being tabled, which is an executive agency and right ought to be tabled, and as such, the clerk would have read into the records the tabling of the report.
So Madam Speaker, when you say right or to be so, it means that the previous disposition that was stated in this Parliament has been reversed. That is...
I don't know of that. I do clearly recall the Speaker having a discussion with the Parliament as it related to public bodies under Section 30 and not as it relates to executive agencies which operate in the same way as does ministries, departments, and agencies. And as such, I have actually included PICA's report.
Yes, just one other question. So in relation to...
It's not a reverse. In relation to no other, not to the public bodies.
Madam Speaker, in relation to PICA, are you saying that that report was just received? The PICA report?
I came to Parliament, the report I saw on the decks, in keeping with the requirement to table as received reports for ministries, agencies, departments, of which executive agencies qualify. I am tabling the report. I was not here last week, as you would know, and I am Speaker today, and I'm operating as Speaker today as I should. So I would not be able to say to you if it was received a minute ago. I know I've received it, and as such, I'm having the clerk read it into the records and having it tabled.
Yeah. So could the clerk advise whether or not we have now received the opinion of the AG?
It is not my understanding that such an opinion has been received up to 2 o'clock when we commenced Parliament. I was not so made aware. To the best of my knowledge, no.
Madam Speaker, I'm aware that we are meeting tomorrow before we go off on the break. Would it not be, I think, in the public's interest for us to urge some response so that at least the Parliament can be assured of the AG's position before we go off on our break?
I am sure the Speaker and the Parliament would have written, and I'm sure the urgency is not lost on the AG's department. I am absolutely certain of that. I believe that sometimes we have discussions in here that mislead members of the public. When reports come from ministries, agencies, and departments of which the ministers are fully aware of its content, they are tabled immediately. I have found, not as Speaker, but as a member of PAAC so many times, that the minister's mouth drops open in Parliament when a report is tabled for a public body because they are actually not aware of any of the findings being tabled. And as such, I think for us to ensure that the law is a shackle and that we follow the law, we await the opinion of the AG's department. Thank you very much, member. Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees,
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House of Representatives a copy of the report of the Joint Select Committee on its deliberations to consider and report on the bill entitled the Bail Act 2022-2023, which was laid on the table of the House of Representatives on the 18th day of July 2023.
Thank you, Minister Malahoo, for notices of motions given orally. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, there are a number of motions to be tabled by members. Permit me to commence that process, Madam Speaker. I beg to give notice that members, yes. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move. Be it resolved, with reference to the resolution approved by this Honourable House on the 7th day of February 2023, appointing a Joint Select Committee on the Security Interests in Personal Property Act 2013, that the committee be allowed to hold hybrid meetings that are partly virtual and partly physical, utilizing available information and communication technologies in the manner more specifically outlined below. Preserving the rights, powers, and privileges, including voting rights, normally accorded to a member of a committee, the committee, Madam Speaker, is hereby empowered to 1. Convene and hold meetings in virtual spaces, using information and communication technologies which shall be considered committee meetings for the purpose of the mandate of the committee. 2. Allow access and participation from remote locations as are enabled by means of information and virtual technologies by members and other persons authorized by the committee. 3. To include members accessing and participating from remote locations as part of its quorum. 4. Receive, consider, deliberate on, and respond to feedback and submissions in formats, modes, and media, and via platforms, modes, and media, enabled by means of information and communication technologies from any person. 5th, consider any and all information generated, communicated, and received via formats, platforms, modes, or media as enabled by means of information and communication technologies as part of the record of the committee's meeting. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a further later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion.
House Leader, would you like to guide those who will go next, or would you?
Yes, Madam Speaker, because it is a long list. The Minister of Finance has 2 motions, the casino gaming and the general consumption tax, and then the Minister of National Security has a long list, and he will follow.
I believe we all have the listing, so once you get to your feet, Minister, and you're ready, please do all of what you have at one time, and then we move on to national security, and we will continue in that way.
Thank you, Speaker. I appreciate the very clear instructions. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. The General Consumption Tax Amendment of Schedules Order 2023 Resolution. Whereas by virtue of Section 60, subsection 1 of the General Consumption Tax Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may, by order published in the Gazette, amend the schedules to the Act, and whereas the schedules to the Act specify the general consumption tax and the special consumption tax imposed on the supply in Jamaica or the importation into Jamaica of goods and services, and whereas on the 18th day of July 2023, the Minister made the general consumption tax amendment of Schedules Order 2023, and whereas it is provided by Section 60, subsection 2 of the Act, that an order amending the schedules to the Act shall be subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives, and whereas it is desirable that the general consumption tax amendment of Schedules Order 2023 be affirmed by resolution, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. This resolution may be cited as a general consumption tax amendment of Schedules Order 2023 resolution. 2. The general consumption tax amendment of Schedules Order 2023 resolution, which was laid on the table of the House on the 18th day of July 2023, is hereby affirmed. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move the following motion. Be it resolved that the second supplementary estimates of expenditure for the financial year ending March 31st, 2024, and the Jamaica Public Body second supplementary of revenue and expenditure for the year ending March 31st, 2024, which were laid on the table of the House on the 18th day of July 2023, be referred to the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration report. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. The Casino Gaming Minimum Capital Investment Order 2023 Resolution. Whereas Section 9, subsection 6 of the Casino Gaming Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, provides that the Minister may, by order subject to affirmative resolution, amend the amount of the minimum capital investment specified in subsection 3D of the section, and whereas on the 17th day of July 2023, the Minister made the Casino Gaming Minimum Capital Investment Order 2023, and whereas it is desirable that the Casino Gaming Minimum Capital Investment Order 2023 be affirmed, now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. 1. The resolution may be cited as the Casino Gaming Minimum Capital Investment Order 2023 resolution, and 2. The Casino Gaming Minimum Capital Investment Order 2023, which was laid on the table of the House on the 18th day of July 2023, is affirmed.
Minister of National Security, Dr. the Honourable Horace Chang, Deputy Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give.
Just beyond shadow of a doubt, 450.
All right. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice. At the next meeting of the House, I will move.
I've had a sharkish enterprise team. So, just 500 is there, but...
Good. Efficiency. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I'll move that Honourable House approve the following resolution on the Law Reform Zones of Special Operation, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act 2017. 1. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operation, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the August Town Zone Extension Period of Operation Number 4 Order 2023 Resolution. 2. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Greenwich Town Zone Extension Period Operation Number 4 Order 2023 Resolution. 3. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, Denham Town Community Zone Extension Period of Operation. Number 4, Order 2023 Resolution. For the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Mount Salem's Community and Environment in the Parish of St. James Zone Extension Period of Operation. Number 4, Order 2023 Resolution. 5, the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Norwood Community in the Parish of St. James Zone Extension Period of Operation. Number 4, Order Resolution 2023. Number 6, the Law Reform Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Parade Garden Zone Extension Period of Operation. Number 4, Order 2023 Resolution. The Law Reform Zones of Special Operation, Special Security and Community Development Measures, the Savlamar Zone Extension Period of Operation. Number 4, Order 2023 Resolution, which were all laid on the table on the 18th day of July 2023, that's today. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take these motions. Thank you.
Minister Tufton.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and read as a first time a bill shortly entitled the National Family Planning Repeal Act 2023 and a bill shortly entitled the National Council on Drug Abuse Repeal Act 2023.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Malahoo Ford.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the report of the Joint Select Committee on its deliberation to consider and report on the bill entitled the Bail Act 2022, which was laid on the table of the House of Representatives on the 18th day of July 2022, be approved.
Thank you. Questions and answers to questions? Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice? Motions relating to the sitting of the House? Motions for leave to introduce bills? Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Minister Tufton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the first reading of a bill shortly entitled the National Family Planning Repeal Act 2023 and a bill shortly entitled National Council on Drug Abuse Repeal Act 2023.
Thank you, Minister.
A bill shortly entitled the National Family Planning Repeal Act 2023 and the National Council on Drug Abuse Repeal Act 2023 read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I now move that a bill shortly entitled the National Family Planning Repeal Act 2023 and a bill shortly entitled National Council on Drug Abuse Repeal Act 2023 be read a first time. Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bills.
Public business, House Leader.
Madam Speaker, On the matter of public business, Madam Speaker, the debate on the Child Protection Act, which should have been concluded today, the Minister is unavoidably absent, but we hope that tomorrow, all being well, we should be able to conclude so that we finish this session with that bill behind us. Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
The question, members, listen now. The question is that the minister would like to take the motion at a later stage. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the motion be approved.
The question is that the motion be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the resolution, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Those against?
Yes.
The ayes have it.
Motion. It was in those motions. Madam Speaker, I want to assure this House that this will be the last of these short, repetitive motions for extension. The amended bill has been prepared, and we're going to still have legislative committee take a run through it and make sure that what we have decided will be there and amendments to cabinet. But it will certainly be coming. In fact, if the House meets next week, I may be able to bring it next week, as early as next week. But certainly, the first sitting on return, and we can take it through all the stages, given that we went through Joint Select Committee, and it was a very congenial, Joint Select. We agreed, and yes, we'll allow it. When I say take it through, not in the same day, we'll have to allow to go through, doesn't have that, what we agreed to, and if there's any kind of minor typographical, we'll do it. But it will be finished before this particular one is done. And we are looking at what we'll be looking at is how we can expand the number of zones and activities get out there as Minister can settle the economic arrangements. So, Madam Speaker, as we approach the summer recess of Parliament, it is critical we make the necessary arrangements to keep the Law Reform Zones of Special Operation, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act to ensure the uninterrupted continuation of the work within the zones during our scheduled period of adjournment. I therefore rise to request a further extension of the 7 zones of special operations, which all expire August 24, 2023. The zones of special operations have been brought about meaningful improvement in the lives of these residents. These communities have benefited, and all of them are now have moved beyond the clear hold phase, several in the build phase, and others will begin the build phase during the term of this extension. The ministry papers have been laid in the House for review. I therefore request support of the members in approving the extension. Acting on the advice of the National Security Council and in accordance with the law reform, the Zones of Special Operations, Special Security and Community Development Measures Act, in accordance with Section 5 of the Act, which guides that the Prime Minister and Council, after consultation with the Joint Command, may by order subject to affirmative resolution of the House of Representatives extend the period referred to in Section 4.3. The Mount Salem, Denham Town, August Town, Greenwich Town, Norwood, Parade Gardens, and Savannah zones of special operation, special security and community development measures will extend for a further period of 60 days. The zones, Madam Speaker, the zones continue to transition along the clear hold build spectrum. Mount Salem and Denham Town will continue in the build phase and are showing extremely good outcomes, while Greenwich Town, August Town, Norwood, Parade Gardens, and Savannah will continue the hold phase for this period of extension. The achievement and progress we have attained in the zones are undeniable. It is therefore imperative that we continue to support these efforts in the interests of national security and the safety and security of our vulnerable and volatile communities and the continued development program in these areas. Madam Speaker, the investments that we have made within the zones of special operations are having the desired impact. We are transforming zones to safe, stable, and sustainable communities. We therefore seek the affirmative support of this House, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Contribution debate, if there was the support, you would know.
Madam Speaker, I am glad that we're doing this now, so we didn't have to come back in August to do it, which was what I'd asked for when we did the extension a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. And I look forward to seeing the amendments that were agreed in the Joint Select Committee in the bill, which we hope will be tabled. If this is tomorrow is the last sitting, then the first sitting after the summer recess. We have no objection to the extension of these zones. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Madam Speaker, let me thank the members for their support for the resolution. The work being undertaken in these zones are special. It's an area in national security that we have been able to achieve a level of unison, and I think among what we're doing, and we'll continue to maintain them. They are beyond just security. I said it's a matter of where it could be described as security in its broader sense, both violence, breaches of public order, but also development in our communities, which creates the environment for the safety and security of the community in there. And we would like to maintain these and begin to expansion at an early date. The infrastructure and social development activities progress. The security force remain active and vigilant within the zones to ensure that all attempts by criminal gangs to disrupt the stability in the zone are met with the full extent of the law, and the tools that are available to secure the force are utilized, and the work to continue the transformation of the communities will continue. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the members of the House for their support and move for the affirmation of the relevant resolutions in all 7 communities.
Thank you, Minister. House Leader, we do have the Minister of Finance left.
Yes,
I am not clear as to whether or not Minister Malahoo Fort will also need to go.
Minister Kala.
Madam Speaker, I now move with respect to the tabling of the second supplementary estimates and the Jamaica public body estimates of revenue and expenditure, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
House, those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Next.
Madam Speaker, I now move, be it resolved that the second supplementary estimates of expenditure for the financial year ending March 31st, well, before I do that, it's customary, Madam Speaker, for me to just give an overview before the estimates go to the PAAC so that the conversation can be constructive. Madam Speaker, I table a second supplementary estimates for the financial year 23-24 for central government, as well as the first estimates for the public bodies. As the country is aware, the government of Jamaica commenced implementation of the public sector compensation restructure in December of 2022, and this process continues to be underway. Given the effective implementation date of April 1st, 2022, and the fact that discussions with some unions continued into the current fiscal year, it was not possible to build into each head of the 23-24 budget the relevant adjustments to facilitate payment of the second year compensation restructure amounts. As such, an estimated amount for the second year payments was captured in the contingency head of the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. The primary objective of the second supplementary estimate is therefore to allocate or to reallocate to individual heads the required funds to enable payment of the compensation adjustments during the fiscal year. Madam Speaker, I'd like to note that only some of the heads have been adjusted under the second supplementary estimates as work continues with a number of MDAs to ensure accuracy in determining the amounts for compensation. So for the second year, you have to work out all the details. Those details take time, and so the amount was put into the contingency. We've worked out the details for some MDAs, and they're being reallocated to those MDAs. Madam Speaker, a number of entities are also being allocated one-off grants or additional subventions to enable them to meet compensation restructure. So these are entities that have other sources of revenue that they normally finance their activities that need central government support at this time. Also being addressed under the second supplementary estimates are consequential adjustments arising from changes in the assignments of subjects and departments and agencies of other public bodies. The second supplementary estimate therefore provides, one, the transfer of $14.8 billion from the contingency allocation under the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service to a number of MDA heads for Object 21, compensation of employees. The addition of $8.9 billion to recurrent programs, primarily to facilitate the payment of compensation restructure as follows: $1.5 billion to municipal corporations, $1.7 billion to the National Water Commission, $750 million to the Urban Development Corporation, $445 million to the JUTC and Mobay Metro, $990 million to the NSWMA, $166 million to the Golden Age Homes, $167 million to the Poor Relief Officers, and $298 million to infirmaries. Under the recurrent program, the second supplementary estimates also reflects $2.7 billion in value of equipment, including taxes paid on those equipment donated by the People's Republic of China. Madam Speaker, under the government accounting rules, the value of this donation is captured under revenue and also under expenditure. It just has to be recorded. Donation of equipment from the People's Republic of China that we've already received and came across the ports, duty was paid. The value of that donation under our accounting rules has to be recorded as both revenue and expenditure. So revenue came in and we used it to procure those equipments. And the value of that is $2.7 billion. It also reflects the provision of $5.6 billion in loans to public bodies, which comprises $5 billion to Petrojam as working capital support and $600 million to the Sugar Company of Jamaica Holdings Limited. The adjustments arising from changes in assignment of subjects and departments and agencies and other public bodies represent transfers between heads that do not result in any impact of overall expenditure. The second supplementary estimate therefore provides for an overall increase of $14.5 billion in the financial year 23-24 expenditure estimates, which will be financed from an estimated $9 billion higher than program revenue flow and utilization of prior year cash resources to finance the public body loans. The central government spend for the fiscal year is now estimated at $1.06 trillion, up from $1.021 trillion. it should be noted that the rest of the changes announced are simply reallocations from the contingency amount for the public sector compensation restructure to the ministry, departments, and agencies. The public body supplementary estimate reflects the changes in respect of the self-financing entities being assisted by the central government, as well as relevant adjustments to the assignment of subjects and departments, agencies, and other public bodies. After it emerges from the PAAC and goes to the debate next week, other details will be provided. So, Madam Speaker, I now move, if there's no sort of questions on it, I now move be it resolved that the second supplementary estimates of expenditure for the financial year ending March 31st, 2024, which was laid on the table of the House on the 18th day of July, 2023, be referred to the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee of the House of Representatives for consideration and report.
Opposition Leader.
Madam Speaker, I hope the Minister will give us his written statement, as he normally does. Yeah. So we can look back at what he said to get a better understanding of what's happening. But essentially, 14.8 billion is being transferred from contingencies and being reallocated to the specific ministries to cover the compensation adjustments that have been agreed. Understand that. There's an 8 billion of additional support to public bodies, which wasn't in the original budget. And I'm interested, I hope in the PAC we can hear more as to why this is necessary so soon after the end of the last fiscal year. $5 billion as a loan to Petrojam for working capital support. A grant to the National Water Commission of 1.7 billion. We were told that they made a profit last fiscal year. So I'm interested to know why this grant is necessary. And also grants to the UDC and Sugar Company. You also mentioned some other transfers, Minister, in your statement, which I'm not seeing on that page in the heads. So I don't know where those are in the book. But yeah, I'd be interested to know. So, Madam Speaker, I don't have anything really to say other than I look forward to the discussion in PAC where we can get more information around some of these items. Thank you.
Thank you, Opposition Leader. PAC meets tomorrow, July 19, at 12 sharp. All members of the PAAC are expected to be here, and I must, on behalf of the Minister, thank all the members who are so eager to attend and ensure that the second supplementary estimates are reviewed and are back here tomorrow at 2 p.m. for Parliament. Thank you, members and Chairman.
Madam Speaker, may I ask your leave and the indulgence of the Honourable House for me to make a statement in keeping with Standing Order number 18.
The member has asked the leave of the House and the Speaker to make a personal explanation. Let me just read Standing Order 18 for the benefit of the House. With the leave of the Speaker and by the indulgence of the House, a member may make a personal explanation, although there be no question before the House, but no controversial matter may be brought forward, nor may any debate arise upon the explanation. Yes, member, I do give leave. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I will.
Madam Speaker, the most Honourable Prime Minister a few weeks ago asked that members cut the public cascas with regards to the Integrity Commission and asked that anything we have to say should be done within the confines of the Parliament. since the Commission is a Commission of Parliament. As you are aware, Madam, I have been unfairly treated by the Integrity Commission of Jamaica. I have been treated with bias, malice, and contempt. The Integrity Commission did an investigation into the issuance of firearm licenses and reviews done by ministers of national security between 2012 and 2018. They could not find one instance where I broke the law. They could not find any abuse of power. They could not find any action resulting from bribery or fraud, and they did not name me in their final recommendations. They made no recommendations for any actions against me. They made no recommendation for me to be referred to any other investigative body or agency. Madam Speaker, significantly, the Integrity Commission could not get a ruling against me from their own Director of Corruption Prosecution. The reasons are that there was no corrupt act by me, therefore the report did not reach the standard set in law, which says, and I quote, "This act, unless the context otherwise requires, an act of corruption Commission Act of 2017. As you will note, the standard is wide but low, and the report could not satisfy the standard. This report should have been rejected. It should not even have been laid in Parliament. On the 7th of June 2023, I called for a meeting of your Oversight Committee in an address to this Parliament. I have written asking for a meeting of the committee. I spoke again on the 14th of June asking for a meeting, and I am calling for a meeting of the committee so that they can consider the report and act appropriately. Madam Speaker, since I spoke twice in this House, rightfully criticizing the actions of the Integrity Commission, I have received an email letter from the Commission requesting additional information on my 2018 to 2022 returns. Then I got another email withdrawing the request. Then, as usual, I got another email with more requests. And Madam Speaker, the second letter was also withdrawn and replaced. But careful reading of the third letter tells me that that too will be withdrawn. 3 letters, and they can't get it right. All because, Madam Speaker, I spoke up for myself, I spoke up for the teachers, the nurses, the doctors, the police, the soldiers, the civil and public servants. Madam Speaker, they are trying to scare me. They are trying to shut me up, and they are hell-bent on destroying me. Madam Speaker, it seems as if there is a witch hunt out on me. I understand that they are planning, Madam Speaker, to raid my house. I have no problem or objection. Madam Speaker, a person from a media house has asked around in my community exactly where I live, because they are coming to cover a raid by the Commission at my house. If this planned raid is a fact, is this an abuse or a misuse of power? Luckily, Madam Speaker, my mother taught me to pray, and my constituents. They taught me never to tell my God how big my problems are, rather to tell my problems how big my God is. The Integrity Commission is abusing its powers. Any reasonable person would expect that if an annual report is made in 2018 and a request not made for additional information, and you made a return in 2019, in 2020, in 2021, and in 2022, is it reasonable to ask 4 years later? Madam Speaker, no matter what I supply them, the die is cast. I publicly criticize them, then I must be taught a lesson. They are going to continue asking for information and then, of course, charge me just before or close to an election. That's my opinion. They are above criticism. If you criticize,
Madam
they
Speaker,
will come after
Madam
you.
Speaker, on a point of order, I think what is happening here is most improper. Conjecture about future acts which haven't occurred, raiding of houses, releasing of reports before a general election, pure speculation. This is not the purpose of a personal statement, and it should not be allowed.
So, opposition leader, because the section allows for no debate, I will not be able to allow any debate. However, member, equally, I specifically ensure that I read the section for the House. This personal statement should not be a controversial one. Are you almost finished? I was thinking it would have been a pleasure to have seen the personal statement before it was read, but I have not seen it. Are you almost finished?
A couple more minutes, Madam Speaker.
Please, member, remember.
Thank you, Madam.
Non-controversial.
Thank you, Madam. Madam Speaker, my comments are not controversial. They may be viewed at that by others. Madam Speaker, the report laid in March 2022, the Integrity Commission has publicly advised me to seek a judicial review. That is very well. But Part 56, subsection 1 of the Supreme Court Civil Rules state in part, and I quote, an application for leave to apply for judicial review must be made promptly and in any event within 3 months from the date when the grounds for the application first arose, end of quote. Even if the court is minded to grant an extension, which at times they do, most times it's mainly on medical grounds. So, Madam Speaker, not even good free legal advice they are willing to give me. The report basically claims that I gave persons with adverse traces gun license, and they have sought to condemn and destroy me for following the law, which states, and I quote, the minister, upon receipt and consideration of recommendations of the review board, shall give the authority such directions as the minister may think fit. Section 38, subsection 3 of the Firearms Act. This was reinforced by a Court of Appeal decision in November 2021, Ivy versus the FLA. But, Madam Speaker, I'm being condemned for following the law. The St. James Parish Court, Madam, confirmed that a gentleman appeared before it in the Western Regional Gun Court in September 2016 and was found guilty for illegal possession of firearm and was fined $1 million or 2 years imprisonment. And on the second count of assault was fined $500,000 or 6 months. The Firearm Licensing Authority rightfully revoked the firearm of the person in question, as they do for everybody. A few years later, the said person appealed. The review board, in treating with this case of a convicted criminal on the charge of illegal possession of firearm, said in a letter, and I quote, the review board recommends that the decision of the authority in respect of the revocation be set aside. Madam, this person is not of questionable character. This person is a convicted criminal in a court of law. The review board, Madam, has discretion in the law. When they exercise their discretion, it is fine. But when a minister exercises discretion, it is corrupt. Madam, something is not right. Madam Speaker, I have stood up for myself, and I'm standing up for all decent law-abiding citizens who I have called for them to get a weapon if they so desire. Farmers, policemen, teachers have all been turned down, but yet a convicted criminal, not of questionable character, convicted criminal. Madam Speaker, there seems to be one rule for some and another rule for others. It seems as if this world is not level. Madam Speaker, another matter, another case. A media house carried a story of a Jamaican caught in an international drug ring in 2010. that involved police from Panama, Costa Rica, the United States, and our Jamaican police. Cocaine, heroin, ganja was being shipped from Jamaica in containers, endangering the good name of legitimate exporters and threatened the earnings of the nation. The activities to break this ring took 3 years of hard work, and the raid at the time found drugs valued at US $6 million. The Firearm Licensing Authority revoked a gun permit as a result of the information. And the review board said, and I quote, "There has been an allegation that the applicant is involved in drug trafficking." And quote, "The revocation of the license was done on the mere say-so of the National Intelligence Bureau. This is most unsatisfactory. The review board recommends that the revocation order be set aside and that the firearm user status of the applicant be restored." Madam Speaker, can you believe that? The intelligence arm of this country is being dismissed. There are thousands of Jamaicans who have their gun applications turned down because of an adverse trace from the NIB, yet the review board in a letter is saying you can't do that on the mere say-so of the NIB. The question must be asked, why? Madam Speaker, in closing, all I am asking for is equity. Equity before the law. Because, Madam Speaker, the law, the Integrity Act says, and I quote, "The Commission shall act independently, impartially, fairly, and in the public's interest." Madam Speaker, did the Integrity Commission in my treatment act independently? Were they influenced by some unseen or unknown equity or person? Madam Speaker, did they act impartially towards me? Did they act fairly towards me? Did they act, Madam Speaker, in your interest? Do you feel that the Integrity Commission will treat you or anyone you know fairly or equitably? Did the Integrity Commission act in the public interest? Madam Speaker, if you are any reasonable Jamaican, answer no to any of these questions, then it is clear that the Commission has not acted in the public interest, and they should do the decent thing and withdraw the report. I again renew my call for a meeting of the Oversight Committee to consider the March 2022 Integrity Report and act appropriately. Madam Speaker, Jamaica needs an anti-corruption body. We really do. We need one that every nurse, police, soldier, security guard, civil and public servant can trust. We need one that does not unduly or unfairly treat a citizen of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, I urge you to set a date quickly because I need to clear my name. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, this Honourable House is always mindful of its privileges and indeed, Madam Speaker, the scope and scale of its operations and the ability at all times to enable members to express in terms that are of critical importance to themselves on matters that are of national importance as it relates to themselves. And the standing order does provide for it. We urge, however, in all of this, Madam Speaker, that members take full cognizance of the critical responsibility that the standing order does place on each of us in terms of our presentation and indeed listening carefully to what each other has had to say. Madam Speaker, I beg to move for the recommittal of the item notices of motions given orally, to allow me to take a motion with regards, Madam Speaker, to the standing orders, and also for recommittal at a later point for statement by ministers to allow the Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport to make her statement.
On the question of notices of motion given orally recommittal, those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. On the question of recommitting statement by Minister, those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Statement by Minister. Minister Grange, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Copies will come shortly. I must apologize for having to start before the copies are made available. And I would like, if I could get the podium, please.
Please. A podium, please. Honourable Olivia Grange, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, following on my announcement of July 3, 2023 as the effective date for the Sexual Harassment Act, I rise to inform the House about the establishment of the Sexual Harassment Tribunal, with jurisdiction for hearing complaints and resolving disputes related to the Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act 2021. The recently passed Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act 2021 addresses concerns about sexual harassment which are employment-related, occur within institutions, or that arise within the confines of landlord and tenant relationship. It also seeks to provide effective means of redress for victims, as well as outlines penalties to be meted out to perpetrators. Many persons do not report sexual harassment simply because there is often no guidance or policy in place to direct them. In addition, several persons are uninformed about how to report the problem or from whom to seek assistance. Many also say and do nothing about the harassment because they are aware of how the problem is popularly perceived and trivialized, especially in an environment where there is no moral or structured support to address complaints of sexual harassment. Due to the lack of structure or workplace policy to address complaints of sexual harassment, individuals who make these complaints often find themselves being adversely treated. They may be overlooked for promotion, branded as troublemakers, transferred from their department, or in some cases terminated. Now, the Sexual Harassment Protection and Prevention Act outlines that a 14-member sexual harassment tribunal is established as an appropriate dispute resolution mechanism for investigating sexual harassment allegations and administering penalties to offenders. The Act contemplates the provision of a specialized adjudicatory setting like that of the Industrial Dispute Tribunal, which is accessible to persons alleging sexual harassment in these institutions and can ensure fair and expeditious settlement. The Act is very specific about the identification and selection of 14 members. Eligibility criteria to serve on the tribunal must entail professional qualifications and extensive experience in roles such as attorneys at law for 4 members, mediators for 4 members, and gender affairs, mental health, employer representation, and labor relations for the remaining 6 members. The composition of the tribunal should also entail considerations of gender parity, where at least half of its members should be females. Madam Speaker, here I will speak some more on the proposed structure of the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. Members of the tribunal who have a vested interest in any case should not take part in any deliberations or decisions associated with these matters. The establishment of the Sexual Harassment Tribunal will ensure that due process is afforded to victims of sexual harassment in a timelier manner than that which would be obtained through the traditional court system. Sittings of the Sexual Harassment Tribunal will be facilitated by the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. The expeditious settlements that will be facilitated with the establishment of the tribunal are anticipated to lead to increased reports where sexual harassment occurs. Currently, it is suggested that sexual harassment is underreported, likely because perpetrators were unlikely to be penalized prior to the passage of the legislation. Madam Speaker, the consultation process is in keeping with the government's consultation code and has included the involvement of numerous stakeholders from various government ministries, departments, and agencies. Non-governmental organizations with specific focus on women's empowerment, non-governmental organizations with specific focus on the empowerment of men, faith-based organizations, other non-governmental organizations, and community-based organizations, as well as educational institutions, media, and concerned citizens. The Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport contracted IRS Plus consultants for the period October 1, 2021 to March 31, 2022 to provide consulting services for the establishment of the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. The major deliverable was, I quote, the guidelines to support the operations of the Sexual Harassment Tribunal, which was submitted on March 2022. Madam Speaker, the proposed structure of the tribunal will be addressed under a number of headings to include physical location of the tribunal, appointment and conditions of service, staffing, remuneration, induction and training. Now, Madam Speaker, interviews were conducted with several representatives and individuals with various knowledge and ideas as to how to make for an effective, efficient SHT. Individuals and representatives from the following organizations proved quite useful in helping to shape and formulate the proposed recommendations. The Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, of course, the Bureau of Gender Affairs, the Industrial Disputes Tribunal, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, representatives from the trade union movement, representatives from organizations representing employers, and industrial relations lawyers and advocates. The expectation among the persons who have been associated with gender-based violence and acts of sexual discrimination is the likelihood of an intensity in the number of cases that will come before the tribunal. Others share similar views and expect that intensity to peak in the short term. While this is the case, there is, however, uncertainty that in the first instance there will be enough cases brought before the tribunal to reasonably occupy its time and satisfy the requirement for 4 full-time panels meeting concurrently. It is proposed that the Sexual Harassment Tribunal will be physically located on premises occupied by the Bureau of Gender Affairs. How large an accommodation that is, the physical square footage required, will depend on a number of other issues being settled in the first instance. This would include the facilities necessary for the panel to conduct hearings, along with appropriate accommodation for the secretary, the stenographer, representatives of both sides, and witnesses. The facilities to accommodate virtual hearings should be immediately included in building out the infrastructure. Similar to the circuit courts, the tribunal should be empowered to conduct hearings in other parishes. Madam Speaker, the Act makes provision for the appointment of a chairperson and 2 deputy chairpersons to be appointed by the Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport from among the members who are attorneys at law. This means that 3 panels can meet concurrently with a total of 9 members empaneled from among the 14 appointed by the Minister. The prevailing view, however, is that in the early period, there may not be sufficient cases to occupy 3 panels on a full-time basis. The IDT, for example, has on average of between 40 to 50 cases referred to it annually. And while sexual harassment is said to be underreported, there is not expected to be an intensity in the number of complaints to be heard and determined by the SHT. For this reason, Madam Speaker, it is being recommended that only 1 panel should be appointed on a full-time basis. The appointment of the chairperson should be in accordance with Section 14, subsection 1, and further appointment of the 2 other members, one so selected from Section 13, subsection 1b, and the other from 13, subsection 1c, and should constitute the permanent panel.
The Minister's time for speaking has expired. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the member's time be extended sufficiently for her to complete her presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Question is that the member's time be extended sufficient to complete statement by Minister. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My statement is a little lengthy, but I think it's important that there is a clear understanding as we're moving into an area that could become very controversial if it's not managed carefully. Madam Speaker, the appointment of the panel pursuant to Section 16, subsection 3 of the Act must ensure that both male and female are represented. Provisions should be made for the appointments of the other members of the tribunal on a part-time basis and for the deputy chairperson to constitute a panel as the circumstances may warrant. The chairperson and the 2 deputy chairpersons should be appointed for a period not exceeding 3 years, and they should be subject to reappointment in accordance with Section 18 of the Act. The remaining members among the 14 would likewise be appointed in accordance with the provision of the Act, save and except that the terms and conditions of their contractual arrangement would reflect their part-time status. So, Madam Speaker, the tribunal should have a secretary already provided for in Section 26, along with additional staff to include a legal officer, a stenographer, an administrative assistant, a secretary. The role and responsibilities of the secretary are briefly outlined in Section 26, subsection 2 of the Sexual Harassment Act. It is proposed that the secretary be appointed, the secretary to be appointed should be aligned with the Director 2 GMC SEG 2 establishment in the public sector, an extended outline of the duties of the Secretary is also provided here. A full-time legal officer will be required to assist the panel in its work. The post should be aligned to the JLG LO3 with the appropriate qualifications. The person who should be an attorney at law would be primarily responsible to the tribunal in the following ways: conduct detailed research relating to both legal and quasi-legal matters. 2, instruct, prepare comprehensive brief and liaise with the Attorney General's chambers on legal issues concerning the tribunal, including applications for judicial review made against the tribunal. And my statement outlines what would be the role of the legal officer, which has been distributed. Now, Madam Speaker, at this time, I would like to now speak to the terms of reference of the Sexual Harassment Tribunal. So, 14 members to support the tribunal and to hear and determine complaints. Over the years, all major countries have acknowledged sexual harassment as a social problem and sought to address it by establishing regulatory frameworks comprising legislation backed by tangible institutional arrangements to give effect to this legislation. In all these countries, governments have established tangible institutions directed at achieving 2 key policy objectives. The first is to promote initiatives such as research, policy making, public education, and workplace training, which are directed at discouraging sexual harassment. The second is to implement procedural arrangements for hearing complaints and resolving disputes arising from allegations of sexual harassment and determining what sanctions or remedies should apply. So, Madam Speaker, in the last 2 decades, the seriousness of sexual harassment has intensified in the workplace. Studies have shown that sexual harassment correlates with workplace-related health issues such as stress, depression, anxiety, and inevitably leads to a decline in organizational productivity. Not only are victims affected by the harassment, but employees looking on have been known to experience apprehension about their work environment perceived as hostile towards women. So, Madam Speaker, at this point, I would just want to indicate that I will be taking the recommendations that have come out of our consultations to Cabinet on Monday for the approval of the 13 persons to be appointed to the tribunal, after which, once Cabinet approves, the members will be announced. Of course, these members have to sign fit and proper documents in order to serve on the tribunal. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me thank the Minister for bringing these statements to the House so that we can have a better understanding as to the provisions around the Sexual Harassment Tribunal, which she shortens as SHT, but I'd rather to call the tribunal because I wouldn't want any slip of the tongue. Having said that, Madam Speaker, I think that the tribunal comes into being after the passing of the Sexual Harassment Act, which actually seeks to deal with issues of sexual harassment in a country where we have had years, maybe I should have said generations, of acceptable inappropriate behavior in terms of how we treat one another over the years, and in terms of the issue of sexual harassment. We are actually in a period of changing mores, changing cultural norms, and therefore we understand that it is not easy. The tribunal provides that space for hearings, for resolving disputes, and to be able to do so in a much more timely manner, and of course to provide the certainty of a space where they can be heard and where persons should be reasonably sure that they will have their day in court. I think the minister, and I know the Act very well in terms of the provisions for the tribunal and the provisions it makes for multiple tribunals. I heard the minister saying that one would be full-time and others would be part-time or as needed. I don't have the data, and so the question that I would ask is what is expected in the beginning in terms of cases coming before the tribunal, and does it mean that even that first tribunal would of necessity be full-time, or is there a provision to determine at what point they would go full-time? I also believe that it is important that members of the tribunal are, we have seen the categories from which the members are drawn, and there are individuals in fields that are important and have an understanding of the issues. I believe, though, that it should not be taken for granted that these individuals, because these individuals are but a microcosm of the larger society, I believe it is important to have that initial orientation to make sure that everyone is on the same page in terms of what is being asked of them in terms of the Sexual Harassment Act and the role of the tribunal. I believe that this provides an opportunity once there are issues. I also believe that as we work through the tribunal and set them up and empower them and allow them to do their work, there is another companion act that is just as important, which really is the public education. And I know we have started some of that public education, but I believe that much more still needs to be done simply because of our cultural norms and how difficult we know it is to change the way people behave, the way people think, and the way we see each other in these circumstances. And I think that we also have to spend a lot of time, energy, and resources making sure that that too is on par. No, not just the men, both men and women. I also believe, especially because we have seen some other entities that we would not have expected to behave in a certain manner, it's important to make sure that members of the tribunal are held to account. Yeah? That they are of the, give me, if you allow me a minute to wrap up, Madam Speaker.
The member's time for speaking has expired. House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's always for good order. I beg to move that the member's time be extended sufficiently to have her complete her presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Question is that the member's time be extended sufficiently to allow for completion of her response to the minister's statement. Those in favor? Those against, the ayes have it.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you, colleague members. I was actually wrapping up and saying that the members of the tribunal need to be held accountable. We have seen in institutions that have been created to protect, whether it is the public in several different ways, where they have failed the public's trust and where they have not behaved
or acted in the way that we would have expected them to. And I also want to be sure that the mechanisms are there for these members to be held accountable and to ensure that individuals that come before them really and truly are able to get the justice that they seek, and that they themselves come from those members of society who are now sharing the thinking that is embodied in the Sexual Harassment Act. I believe that these are far-reaching changes that we are making with the establishment of the tribunal and with the Act itself, and we have to make sure that it functions in the best interest of all our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Member. House Leader? Oh, hold on a moment, House Leader. It would appear that Minister Malahufort would also like to make a contribution.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I really rise to indicate how pleased I am that the processes are moving forward. I know that it has taken some time for the tribunal to be established, and I know that the time had to do with a number of issues that we're working out, because eventually we will be revisiting the entire structure of tribunals across all pieces of legislation. I am especially pleased that for this tribunal there is a training component, and also that in addition to the permanent panels, you will have members who will sit on an ad hoc basis, because sometimes tribunals are unable to meet because the permanent members have other matters, even with the best of intention. I know that this is work in progress, but for a frontier piece of legislation, it's really important that the appropriate training takes place, and I want to commend the Minister for building out that structure. Madam Speaker, it's so important that as we pass new laws, we are reminded that there are important steps that have to be taken for the law to be implemented. And many times the implementing steps linger. I know that in this case, time was allowed for the nation to become familiar with the legislation. In fact, much has been said about it in the news, and at every opportunity, I know the Minister and the members of the ministry have spoken about it, and it's going to be extremely important for Jamaicans to understand in this culture that certain things are no longer permissible. And if you choose to engage in behavior defined in the law as sexual harassment, you may find yourself before the tribunal, and you will have to face the consequences after hearing. So, Madam Minister, through you, Madam Speaker, I just want to say that I'm pleased that the steps are going forward, and I know that you know that I stand willing and hopefully able to be of assistance from the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, given that we have the subject matter of legal education, and I know that it is something that you have become extremely passionate about yourself. I'm also pleased that there will be a full-time legal officer provided to the panel for assistance to conduct research in relation to matters before the panel. I have heard feedback from numerous tribunals that do not have a permanent legal officer assigned, and sometimes they become overwhelmed with the matters being deliberated on. So this is a right move, and I believe that when the panel is fully constituted and hopefully matters go before, that the work will be less onerous than it would otherwise have been. So my commendations, Madam Minister. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you,
Madam
Minister.
Speaker, I just want to thank my colleagues for the support, and just to say that the legislation is gender neutral. Not just women can be harassed, but men can be harassed too. And that we look forward to doing the public education program that will sensitize the public to the fact that this legislation is not just about protecting women, but protecting men as well from harassment. So I just want to thank you all for the support, and I look forward to the public educating itself and understanding what this is all about. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I now put forward the motion which I indicated earlier on. Whereas, Madam Speaker, the Standing Orders 73DE of the Standing Orders refers to the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee convening to consider a report submitted to the Parliament under Section 34 of the Integrity Commissions Act. And whereas Section 36 of the Integrity Commission Act makes provision for the reports of the Commission and not Section 34. And whereas Standing Order 70 establishes the Standing Orders Committee has a duty to consider and report on all matters relating to standing orders as may be referred to it by the House. Be it resolved that Standing Order 73DE be amended as follows. Delete the words Section 34 and substituting thereof the words Section 36. And be it resolved that this motion, Madam Speaker, be referred to the Standing Orders Committee of the House of Representatives, which shall consider and report on the amendment with a view to effecting the change. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. We will go back to public business. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing order to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, indeed, it is a simple error that was there, some regard as a lacuna in the law, where a reference was made to a section which was not, in fact, relevant to it, and therefore gave no authority. We will have a meeting of the Oversight Committee next Tuesday, and we would like to move in good order so that the appropriate reference to Section 36, which gives the authority for the Oversight Commission to, in fact, receive the reports and to review it, would, in fact, be effected. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the motion be approved.
House Leader. Those in favor, I have a suggestion. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Hope it's not inappropriate, House Leader, but I have a suggestion. If the members of the Standing Orders Committee would be so moved, it would be a wonderful thing to meet before the House tomorrow so that we can conclude, and I will definitely be one of the members in attendance.
Madam Speaker, indeed, as the chair is in fact the Speaker, that would be an appropriate suggestion to make, and indeed I'm sure members would in fact comply.
So members, an email will be sent by the clerk. We will make every effort to meet just before Parliament tomorrow to facilitate efficiently getting this motion back to us by tomorrow's sitting. House Leader, there will be no further business.
Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business for the day. I therefore beg to move that the House be adjourned until tomorrow, July 19th, at 2 p.m. at the George William Gordon House.
The question is that the House do now adjourn for Wednesday, July 19th at 2 p.m. sharp. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This Honourable House now stands adjourned.
one day, hey, but I'm with me, I'm gonna praise you anyway. Lord, I'm gonna praise you. Hey, He restoreth my soul. Watch me now. Hey, I'm Mr. Down in the valley, so lonely and cold. My body is shaking to my bones. My Savior said He'll dry the tears from my eyes. He tell me, say, all I need will supply some my needs, yeah.
He's keeping. Now put your hand over your head and just say, cover me, cover me, cover me under your blood. Cover me, cover me, cover me. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, Jesus. Here you now, blessings are on. I'm in look east, west, north and south, and it'll come at me.
Blessing around me, dog.
A goodness and mercy overtake me now.
Blessing around me, dog.
Yes, me look east, west, north and south, and it'll come at me.
Blessing around me, dog.
Oh, keep me true, Lord Jesus, keep me true. For there's a race that I must run, and a victory to be won. Oh, give me power every hour. Keep me true.
It was too much trials, yeah. I came out more than a conqueror. I am more than a conqueror. I am more than a conqueror. Jesus made me conqueror. I am more than a conqueror. Hey, come up when this whole some way astray, them astray. Salvation when that should play. I choose God's will, not the benefit. I choose to live right and I'm loving it. I choose to love my friends and my enemies. I choose, yeah.
Jamaica Gospel Star 2023 is off to a fantastic start, and voting lines are now open. Vote right now up until this Saturday at 6 p.m. You can vote as much as you want. Vote using the free Reggae Jamaica app. The 3 finalists with the lowest number of votes will leave the competition. Make sure you vote as many times as you wish.